Oh. For our 2020 EBTS study. And I was really hoping to make this a more interactive presentation today. I'm not sure if you all are able to talk. I don't know if you're self-muted or not, but I do see a lot of activity in the chat box, so that will just make it a lot more interactive. I think we learned so much from our peers, a lot of good conversation topics to go over today. So to give you a little bit of backstory for those of you that aren't familiar, every single year MetLife does an annual employee benefit trend study. And what we do is we actually interview employees all over the country and ask them point blank questions. This is a study that is used industry wide. They use it even for Senate and things like that. So it really is a study that everybody looks forward to seeing come out every year. Last year, for the 2020 study, and I guess, we're talking in reverse. I know it's not 2021 right now, but we had delayed our study and we were really trying to identify how the trends of the COVID pandemic have affected us throughout the different cycles of exposure and what people were going through. This year is based on 2021. So essentially we interviewed all the employees, and this one in particular, what we did was we pulled out public sector employees from that database and compared them to the rest of the population that we did the study on as well. So it's very specific to your industry and kind of gives you an idea of where the differentiators are in terms of public sector and the rest of the private sector employees. So I believe I can share my screen now. So let me try to do this.
Yes.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for your patience. This is great. And I can still see everybody in the chat box as well. Are any of you guys familiar with the employee benefit trend study? Were any of you a part of last year's presentation? Just trying to get an idea of the exposure we've had. I'm trying to see the chat box. All right. Robin, I can't see the chat box anymore. So if you don't mind just letting me know if there's questions or what pops up in there.
I've got it.
Perfect. All right, so today we're going to go over top trends impacting the workplace, cultivating a more resilient workforce, and increased value of employee benefits. So as we know, there's a lot of turnover right now. And employee benefits have really become a staple and always an important factor when we're talking about our employee wellness, things like that, but especially heightened importance behind employee benefits that we've seen really in the last year. And you guys can still see my screen, right?
Yes.
This is so odd. I've never had a Zoom do this because I can't see anything. It's like a completely black screen. Okay, well, as long as, oops, I don't want to do that. As long as you guys can see my screen, that's great. Okay, perfect. All right, so 1 year later, so a lot of this, like I said, is a comparison from 2020 to 2021 and what has happened in that last year. A lot of this is going to possibly seem like, okay, we know a lot of mental health, things like that, but it really dives into numbers and gives factual data. And there are a few surprising things that came out of this study that we'll definitely touch upon. And I can see your chat box again, guys. So if you guys want to stop me, have questions, please do. So recent challenges that have contributed to our mental health crisis among public sector employees. So this was an interesting finding from my perspective, because in comparing it from 2020 to 2021, lockdown wasn't as much, especially in Florida. People were getting out more. But what we did find is that the mental health crisis continued to worsen. It actually went from 1 in 5 employees saying that their mental health had decreased to 1 in 3 employees from 2020 to 2021, in spite of people being out more, doing different things. So this is really eye-opening. And it's not necessarily about getting out, going back to the office. There's a lot that's happened in the last 2 years, and mental health and employee wellness has been really top of mind and of importance. And yes, you guys are going to get a copy of the slides as well, that I will send out too. So this is really interesting, and it will kind of go into our next topic, but public sector employees have needed to seek help with stress, burnout, and mental health issues in the past month. So what that tells us is that if people are actually going out to seek help, things like EAP programs, wellness programs have become even more of a significant importance. Out of curiosity, how many of you guys are offering full EAP programs? Fantastic. All right, I love it. I love to see it. So, EAP is something that, is kind of our go-to when we think of mental health. There's a lot of different aspects to mental health, right? And that's kind of what we're going to get into. So when we think of mental health, our initial is, who can somebody talk to? We want to make sure that we're creating an open and communicative workforce where people feel comfortable going to their leadership and talking about some of the things that they might be going through. Not a surprise to everybody, but balancing home and work life was really a top subject of importance that came out of this study. Even though people are, especially in public sector, in the office, going back to work, there's still a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes. As we all know, if you had kids, if schools were getting canceled, if you are in the school industry, you've been experiencing that as well. That is a number one priority. Number two is financial concerns. And I think that this is a really important one to talk about, because when we think of mental health and wellness, a lot of times we're thinking of EAP programs. What can we do, to offer our employees support? And financial wellness doesn't generally come up. Out of curiosity, just to kind of keep it interactive, is anybody doing, outside of your typical retirement plans, any financial education offering to employees? Or any creative ideas you had? Well, since quarterly. Are these things that you've been doing for a while, or something you're kind of getting kicked off? Free financial wellness programs. Yeah, I think this is such a big topic, and I love all the comments and the sharing coming in, because it is something that, financial wellness has been something historically that was a nice to have from your employer. Employees, usually went out and we get a financial advisor, do these things on their own. But what we're seeing from the study is that there's more and more of an expectation for employees to get financial wellness and education through their employer. I think coming out of the pandemic as well, obviously, we've all seen it personally, prices going up, inflation, whether it's rent or buying a home. A lot of these impacts that we haven't experienced in the recent past that a lot of people are having to deal with. So offered through your EAP program, that one is an interesting one. So with financial concerns, and it's kind of on the next slide, so we can go ahead and get into that. That is one of the big hot topics, right? So when we think of wellness, and I know that this was a lot, we'll kind of go back to 2020 study for those of you who were on that call. We talk about holistic wellness. So holistic wellness is a variety of different things. You have your mental health, you have your financial wellness, and you have your benefits that you talk about, whether it's disability. How am I overall well as an employee? And then another big one that came out of this study is retaining top talent. So I am sure, just from my own personal experience and having conversations in this last year, that a lot of you all have experienced similar turnover. It's not to one industry, it's not just public sector that's experiencing this. This is industry wide. We think about if we go to a restaurant, the staffing, the customer service that we're kind of getting from a lot of different angles. So everybody is really focused on how can we retain and keep top talent in such a competitive workforce. And I thought that this was a really interesting statistic for public sector employees specifically. Public sector employers are lacking confidence in their performance. So essentially what they did, and what these data points are, is that they asked for the employers to rate their own performance in these areas. And as you can see, whether or not it's actually valid because it's not stacking up against private sector is in the eye of the beholder. Maybe public sector is just being more honest with themselves than some of the private sector employers are being in terms of what they're offering. But there is a large gap in what HR and what public sector employers are feeling like they're offering to their employees, and thinking that there's a lot more that they can be doing from a mental health standpoint. And so the three categories we aligned with were employee satisfaction, employee engagement, and employment well-being. And so not only is it becoming more apparent in the study that, like we talked about, well-being was always, maybe we have an EAP program, maybe if someone's really going through something, we offer it. Financial wellness, maybe we do a thing here and there, but it wasn't necessarily an expectation that employees had prior to that this is something they expected their employers to be offering. That has really significantly changed in the last few years. So it used to be a nice to have, but not something that the employees necessarily expected. And this one I'm curious about because, like we discussed, it is a national study, and we know that Florida has operated a little bit differently than the rest of the country in the last year or so. Are you all seeing remote work still at this point in time? Some? Okay, great. Yeah, I think that this is something that maybe isn't as relevant in Florida, but kind of to the point of more requests for remote work. I think because maybe a lot of national companies or, people's spouses, friends have more flexibility in the coming to the office, coming on site space, that there's more requests for it or more of an expectation for flexibility from their employers than there would have been in the past. So this is a national statistic. I don't unfortunately have anything for Florida, but I was pretty surprised by it, probably because I work only with our Florida customers, but 53% of employees agree that COVID significantly disrupted the industry they work in. So went from 18% working remotely to 57% working remotely still throughout the entirety of 2021. So that gives us a little bit of a national perspective of what we're seeing, and probably, to your point, more flexibility being requested. And that leads into work-life balance, right? So when employees have maybe gotten used to having remote, or they're seeing friends and family that have more flexibility, it creates more demands in this space. So this is a really big hot topic for how leadership is handling work-life balance. And a lot of that revolves around flexibility. It's no longer just PTO. It is things like, leave early, maybe work from home on a Friday. A lot of creative things that are kind of coming out of this from the demands of employees pushing that flexibility. So resiliency. Resiliency is an interesting word because I think obviously this is a very objective or subjective comment. But we do ask this question in our studies about, are you feeling resilient? I think in 2020, when everything was first happening, a lot of people were, on board with things. And then as time went on, it's become more and more things are catching up, the work-life balance, maybe financial wellness, costs of going into things. So this aligns to me with the mental health aspect. It's just kind of continuing to decrease as time has gone on, which I think in 2020 we would have expected, if things were opening up, that would actually be the opposite. So this is the slides that I really wanted to focus on. And this is talking about how management and leadership and people that are in your roles can really go about investing in a positive workplace culture without necessarily just focusing on adding programs, right? Because all the programs that we have and that we offer are fantastic, but we want to make sure that people are getting the most out of them, right? And feeling comfortable utilizing these benefits. And when we have leadership and we have HR and we have, our top employees really advocating for these programs, having others that have used it talk about it, share it with their friends and coworkers, that's how we see them really take a lift and become utilized programs. Because it's easy. It's not necessarily easy. Sorry, I'm going to take that back, because I personally know how hard it is to put these programs into place, but we just want to make sure we have the communication piece of things in promoting as well. So empathy and support, overcoming that stigma, and that kind of comes again from a management level. How can we as managers really play a role in reducing the stigma of utilizing the EAP programs, asking for help, and supporting employees that have mental health issues? I wouldn't even call them mental health issues. I would just say dealing with mental wellness, because we all see it in some sort of capacity. And a piece of that is, right, we talked about EAP, we talked about financial wellness seminars. Actually, MetLife just came out with a financial wellness app for larger groups that we're piloting right now. We looked at the employee workforce and said a lot of people are feeling a lot of emotions around employee benefits, around financial wellness. And so how do benefits make your employees feel, and how can you tangibly record that? So for example, on the app that we put together, we actually are asking, how do you feel about your finances? And they use emojis and things that are very relatable, because things like financial wellness, things like mental health are a lot of times things that employers and employees are not going to want to openly talk about. So there are some skewed perceptions of how open and happy employees are. And that's really where this study comes into play, is that you can look at these data, you can look at these numbers, and have a good idea of what your workforce looks like and kind of get that honest feedback. So we already talked about this a lot, but I'm going to kind of dive into what I think the most important slide is from a holistic wellness perspective, and some, kind of misconceptions that I've seen in the industry is a lot of times when I've had conversations, we'll hear, our employees aren't asking for that, or our employees don't necessarily need the choice. That's overwhelming for them. What we found in our studies is that in today's workplace, where we have things at our fingertips, everything is personalized. People love personalization, down to, I want a new shampoo, I'm going to go online and take a little quiz and see what shampoo best fits me, right? There's personalization for absolutely everything. And people want to know that what they have and what they're being offered is specific to them. And having so many different generations right now in our workforce, this can be really difficult to try to manage those expectations of choice. And that's where the difference in benefits come into play, and offering a variety of different things. I think public sector in general, nationally, we see that if it's not something that is being funded or paid for, that they're worried about asking for employees to cover it themselves. They don't think that they would want it. And we've seen results that say otherwise in our data. What do you guys think? And this is kind of a no right, no wrong answer. Would you feel outside of medical is your number one requested or talked about benefit? Probably should have done that before I put the slide up, but these are employees, so this is from your perspective. Okay, dental. EAP and counseling services, retirement plan, retirement pension. That's definitely when we look at this, and that was what stood out to me too, right? Because obviously in the public sector space, the retirement plans, the pensions are things that a lot of our private sector companies aren't necessarily offering. So this is a comparison of the percentage of public sector that describe these as a must-have benefits versus all employees. So as you can see, public sector, pension plans, 62 versus 48% for the general population. There's a couple of things that really differ. Obviously, if you're working for public sector, you're expecting these retirement plans, and it's more of a conversation. I think that the dental insurance piece is really interesting, and obviously that's our bread and butter. That's what we really do a lot of. But when I was looking through this, and this is something that kind of came up in conversation, I found it very unusual that the disability insurance was so low on this list, especially with everything going on. And from my conversations with some of our broker partners, coworkers, I think a lot of it is education based from an employee perspective. Maybe they don't necessarily understand what that benefit offers. And it could be a gap in knowledge there. Because that really is from a, perspective of a benefits agent, an employee. That really is a very important benefit, especially in this day and age, with the risk of having to go out either for our mental health, pregnancy, different things being at an all-time high. Do you guys have any thing that was surprising to you on this list? And I don't know if you all are able to talk or if you can only do the chat. I like to hear from people. It all pretty much captured what you guys were thinking. It is really interesting. I'm surprised by that too. And I say that, but then I'm also not necessarily. I think that before the last 2 years, the amount of times that I had been asked about an EAP program we had, whether it was attached to life or to disability, was I probably could count it on my hands. It's really something that people had offered, but maybe not necessarily taken advantage of. Like, for example, I know that we've had ones attached to our life insurance plan or disability, and we would pull utilization reports for our customers and our clients every year. And, they were very, very underutilized. A lot of it, again, comes down to communication. And making sure that employees are aware of these benefits and encouraging them to use them. Some of the things with EAPs that are available I've seen is that you can actually have somebody come out and speak to employees. Maybe that's a good way to break the ice for those that aren't going to reach out necessarily on their own. There are options for them to come out and have wellness topics and things like that as well. So pension plan was rated so high. Yeah, I think when we talk about, employee retention, these are all things that it's interesting to see what employees are really looking at from a benefits perspective, and that that dental is below, or PTO is below dental. That's a good one. That is interesting that, people are going to be looking at the dental insurance over, PTO. But I think that maybe that has to do something with the fact that PTO ends up being kind of a go-to. It's a staple, right? Everybody has PTO options. A lot of people don't end up taking their PTO. That's another thing that, and I don't have a slide necessarily on it, but as we were reading through the study, is not only offering these, but actually taking advantage of them. So encouraging employees to take PTO, or kind of not necessarily forcing them, but it's something that it really has to be approved by management, encouraged by management, supported by management for people to feel comfortable. All right, so there's some conversation on the pension plans as well. So I think everybody can see that piece. I'm not sure if Margarita can actually speak on the panel side, but I'm sure that you guys can connect on that portion as well. So benefits are a critical element of stability, yet public sector employees aren't satisfied with what they receive today. So this goes back to our original slide of, maybe public sector employers lack the confidence in their benefits. And this is from the employee standpoint. So this is really not just public sector comparison, it's benefits in general across all industries, and the expectations of employers offering these benefits to employees having increased and gone up. So one of the pieces to this that I found interesting is that although and this is not you all, but public sector, private sector, everybody is putting such a focus on offering EAP, offering financial wellness seminars, offering all these different things, but it's not necessarily translating into, employee satisfaction. So really taking a deep dive on the benefits you're offering, where you might be able to enhance those programs around mental wellness, around financial wellness. That was one of our lowest ones, was the financial wellness programs, and really communicating them out. I think a lot of people don't realize everything that is offered to them. So coming up with a communication strategy and encouraging your employees to attend. So this is just kind of a stat that's solidifying the communication gap there. So there's still a significant gap between the benefits public sector employees that they're interested in and what they actually own. So this isn't necessarily what they purchased, what they've bought. This might be because it's not offered to them in this day and age, but there is a big gap in between what the employees are actually utilizing and having now as of 2021 and the benefits that they're expecting and that they want. And the interesting thing about this piece is that it really is what we call more of our worksite benefits. So hospital indemnity, critical illness, cancer, maybe not necessarily being offered, to employees on an individual basis. Group plans have become very popular in that space because a lot of them are guarantee issue. They don't necessarily have to answer health questions, which could be a barrier to entry for some of those employees that are not responding that they don't own the benefit. Another interesting one that I found on here was commuter benefits. And I think especially now with the prices of things going up, that becomes a financial conversation as well and can play into your different offerings like your HSA, your FSA. And then I think that this is stood out to me maybe because MetLife just started selling pet insurance in the last 2 years, the access to subsidized care options for child dependent. And then people were actually filling these in and people put in pet too. So it's been a really hard year for people to go back, to work maybe that have recently had a child, their children are at home, or even, concerns around their pet and the care being offered to them, and pet insurance coming up as well. So that's been a new benefit that it's made its way into the study and employers actually offering it. Excuse me. So this is no surprise to everybody. Expectations for benefits are high. I think we probably all feel in the positions that you're in that expectations are just high for everything, right? There's so many different competing priorities and so many different things that you all are managing from that perspective. So one of the biggest things was that obviously ease of use, from an enrollment perspective, from being able to do things self-sufficiently. Online options have significantly increased in the last 2 years. It's kind of become more so of an expectation, especially that the younger generation has, and then that your benefits work together. So this goes along with employee choice and personalization. Employees want options. They want to be able to have the knowledge to pick what's right for them from a benefit standpoint. And so it really becomes about creating an overall package, right? So when we talked about holistic well-being earlier from a benefits approach, right? There's different categories that we can kind of create a puzzle piece and put together. So I know I encourage all of my clients to put this together for their own personal programs and see what they have that fits into these different categories and actually put it down on paper and kind of break it down into where things fit. Because maybe you have a really what we call healthy foundation, which are, those must-have benefits that we saw in the earlier slide: medical insurance, mental health programs, the dental, and then increasing it to, your financial wellness goals, maybe safeguarding your household. So these are more of your unique benefits that maybe aren't as frequently discussed, but something employees are really looking for, whether it's, legal insurance, auto and home, even identity theft now has become a very big talking point and real thing that so many people are dealing with. And having access to all of these things through their employer is becoming less of a want to have and more of an expectation. People a lot of times used to go elsewhere and get these items on their own, and more people are wanting to offer through their company, down to having their auto payroll deducted, just having it all in one place. How many of you guys have, kind of sat down and those of you that were a part of last year's conversation and put together your holistic view and approach? I know that, in our previous study for 2021, a lot of it was focused on separating out those buckets and then creating communication strategies behind them as well. And you guys are going to get a copy of this presentation. Oh, perfect. Responded yes. You will get a copy of this presentation. I think it's going to be really beneficial to kind of sit down and see what you have. These last couple of years have been a crazy couple of years, as you guys, I'm sure, are all aware of, and sitting down, taking a refresh, seeing what you're offering, seeing where you can maybe do more, and then going to your trusted partners, your broker partner, carrier partners, and seeing where they can help support you in these endeavors, because there are a lot of things out there. So once you kind of narrow down what you're looking for, you might find things that you needed, or things that you maybe didn't even know were out there. So does anybody have any questions for me or for Robin before we kind of wrap it up? All right, perfect. Well, thank you all so much for your time today. I will be sending this presentation out, and I'll actually give you guys our entire presentation as well. The trend study is a large 30-page binder. This is just taken out specifically for the public sector data, but a lot of really great information in there too. So I'll send that out. This was very high level, but a great starting point for everybody. And please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions. You'll be sending my contact information along with the study as well, if there's anything else that you guys are looking for, because we do have some employee-facing materials as well. Well, thank you guys so much. It was so nice to meet everyone, and I really, really appreciate all your interaction in chat box. Nobody likes to get up and talk for an hour without any responses. So really appreciate you guys, and hope everybody has a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Alexis. We appreciate it. And FPHRA joint members, we look forward to seeing you in person at the FPHRA conference, and hope that everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you so much for your participation.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.